In the annals of human history, few systems rival the Ottoman Empire's Devshirme in its calculated cruelty and systematic dehumanization. This was not merely a practice of forced conscription. It was a state-sponsored machinery designed to abduct, mutilate, and psychologically re-engineer Christian boys into absolute servants of the Sultan. Spanning over 4 centuries, from the 14th to the early 20th century, the Devshirme affected an estimated 200,000 children, leaving an indelible stain on the historical record. A stain that, for too long, remained obscured by sanitized official narratives and the passage of time. The chilling details of this system come to light through a confluence of historical documents, the meticulous, often horrified diary entries of Venetian merchants like Giacomo Bedoa in 1453, dispassionate Ottoman diplomatic and medical records that betray a clinical detachment from the immense suffering, and, perhaps most powerfully, the fragmented, often traumatized accounts of the survivors themselves. Together, these sources paint a harrowing picture of a multi-generational atrocity, one that systematically targeted the most vulnerable members of conquered populations. The genesis of the Devshirme was rooted in the Ottoman need for a loyal, uncompromised fighting force and administrative class. Unlike the Janissaries, who were initially recruited from war captives, the Devshirme sought a more controlled, isolated, and utterly dependent class of servants. Christian communities in the Balkans, Anatolia, and other conquered territories were subjected to this periodic blood tax. Ottoman officials, known as collectors, would descend upon villages, inspecting young boys aged 8 to 12. These weren't random selections. There was a chilling precision to the process. Boys who were too short, too tall, too young, too old, circumcised, or with specific physical defects were often rejected. Instead, officials sought intelligent, robust, and often attractive boys, those deemed most pliable and capable of serving the empire's diverse needs. Families would often try to hide their children or even maim them in desperate attempts to spare them this fate. But resistance was met with brutal repression. Once selected, the boys were forcibly separated from their families, often witnessing their parents' despair and helplessness, a traumatic first step in the systematic severing of their former lives. They were then forced on arduous marches, often hundreds of miles, towards Constantinople or other central Ottoman cities. These journeys were grueling, marked by hunger, thirst, and fear. Many perished along the way, succumbing to exhaustion, disease, or the brutality of their captors. For those who survived, the true horror was yet to begin. Upon arrival, the boys faced the most physically devastating and psychologically scarring ordeal: castration. This was not a medical procedure performed with care or hygiene. Accounts describe crude, violent operations carried out in unsanitary conditions, often by untrained individuals. Giacomo Bedoa's diary, though written by an outsider, captures the visceral fear associated with this procedure, hinting at the high mortality rates. Ottoman medical records, while attempting to legitimize the practice with bureaucratic language, subtly confirm the brutality. They describe techniques involving crude ligatures, sharp instruments, and the deliberate withholding of water post-operation to induce dehydration, thereby increasing the chances of death, a horrifying testament to the medical knowledge being weaponized for oppression. The stated purpose of castration was to ensure that the boys, once grown, would have no lineage, no family to whom they could owe allegiance other than the Sultan. This physical mutilation was designed to induce not only physical incapacitation, but also a profound psychological breakdown. The mortality rate within the first month after castration was astonishingly high, often reaching 90% due to blood loss, infection, and dehydration. For those who survived this initial gauntlet of pain and terror, a new life, devoid of their former identity, awaited. The survivors entered a rigorous and relentless regime of mental reprogramming. This process was meticulously designed to erase their past selves and forge them into perfect servants, utterly submissive, dependent, and loyal only to the Sultan. The first step was isolation. They were often housed in segregated academies or palace schools, cut off from any external contact, especially with their former communities or any remnants of their Christian heritage. This physical isolation reinforced the psychological break. Renaming was another crucial element in this process of identity erasure. Each boy was given a new, often Turkish or Arabic, name, severing their last linguistic connection to their birth families and culture. They were forbidden from speaking their native languages, forced instead to learn Ottoman Turkish. Any slip-up, any attempt to cling to their old identity, was met with harsh punishment. This linguistic and nominal re-education was a constant reminder of their new reality and their subordinate status. Beyond these overt methods, more insidious forms of psychological conditioning were employed. Constant surveillance was a hallmark of their lives. Every action, every interaction was monitored, fostering an environment of fear and discouraging any form of independent thought or dissent. Emotional manipulation was also prevalent. The boys were taught that their families had abandoned them, or that their previous lives were inferior. They were told that their new existence as servants of the Sultan was a privilege, a path to honor and status, despite the brutal means by which it was achieved. This narrative inversion aimed to create a trauma bond, a profound dependency on their captors for their very survival and perceived well-being. Physical conditioning was equally intense. The boys were subjected to rigorous physical training, turning them into disciplined and resilient individuals. Depending on their aptitude, they were assigned different roles. Those deemed physically strong and less intellectually inclined often became Janissaries, the elite infantry units of the Ottoman army, known for their unwavering loyalty and ferocity in battle. More intellectually promising boys were trained for administrative roles, becoming scribes, treasurers, or palace officials. Others, particularly those with striking appearances, might become palace attendants, tasked with serving the Sultan directly. This categorization, based on perceived intellect and physical attributes, was another layer of the system's calculated efficiency in utilizing its human resources. Regardless of their assigned role, the lives of these boys were marked by profound loneliness and ongoing trauma. They were denied the natural bonds of family and community, instead, existing in a hierarchical system where their worth was entirely defined by their service to the Sultan. Their relationships with peers were often fraught with competition and suspicion, as the system encouraged loyalty upwards, not horizontally. The emotional deprivation and constant pressure to conform left deep, often irreparable, psychological scars. The cruelty of the Devshirme extended well into the men's adulthood. Many of those who survived and rose through the ranks became enforcers of the very system that had brutalized them. The trauma they endured often manifested as a perpetuation of violence and abuse, creating a tragic cycle where victims became perpetrators. They were conditioned to see loyalty to the Sultan as the supreme virtue, and any deviation, any weakness, as a threat to the order they were now bound to uphold. This cycle of abuse highlights a grim psychological truth that systematic dehumanization can lead to the internalization of oppression, turning the oppressed into instruments of oppression themselves. For over 400 years, this system operated with ruthless efficiency, affecting an estimated 200,000 boys. It was a cornerstone of Ottoman power, providing a steady supply of loyal administrators, soldiers, and eunuchs who held no allegiance other than to the Sultan. Yet this long history of institutionalized child abuse remained largely underexamined in official records, often glossed over or presented in sanitized bureaucratic terms. The Devshirme was not abolished due to a sudden moral awakening within the Ottoman Empire. Instead, external pressures, particularly from European powers and internal reform movements, eventually led to its official banning in 1908. Even then, the legacy of its impact lingered well into the 20th century, with the descendants of these forcibly converted and traumatized individuals carrying the weight of this history. Recent archaeological discoveries have begun to shed an even more disturbing light on the true depths of the Devshirme's horrors. Excavations at sites associated with Janissary training and palace schools have uncovered evidence that goes beyond the official Ottoman records. For instance, skeletal remains show signs of repeated surgical trauma, suggesting failed castrations and subsequent agonizing attempts. There is also emerging evidence of chemical residues, hinting at the possible use of psychological drugs, perhaps sedatives, tranquilizers, or even substances designed to induce compliance, to further break the boys' wills and manage their trauma. These findings raise profound questions about the extent of unrecorded medical experimentation and psychological manipulation, suggesting that the official narratives may have significantly underestimated the systematic nature and scientific application of abuse. The implications of the Devshirme system extend far beyond the Ottoman Empire itself. It stands as a stark historical testament to the systematic abuse of power, the weaponization of medical knowledge, and the enduring human capacity for cruelty. The calculated selection and categorization of victims, the deliberate infliction of physical and psychological torture, and the creation of a cycle of abuse all resonate with broader themes of state control and dehumanization seen throughout history. For modern audiences, the story of the Devshirme challenges us to reflect on several critical aspects of human rights and historical memory. Firstly, it underscores the historical continuity of systematic abuse, demonstrating how deeply entrenched such practices can become within authoritarian regimes. The longevity of the Devshirme shows how easily extreme violence and control can be normalized when unchallenged. Secondly, it highlights the devastating interplay of physical and psychological torture. The system's architects understood that breaking the spirit was as crucial as breaking the body, employing techniques that predated modern psychology's understanding of trauma bonds, Stockholm Syndrome, and learned helplessness. Thirdly, the discrepancy between official records and archaeological realities serves as a powerful reminder of the challenges historians face in uncovering hidden atrocities. Official narratives often sanitize or entirely omit inconvenient truths, making it imperative to consult multiple sources, including material evidence, to reconstruct a more complete and accurate picture of the past. The fact that the suffering of these boys remained largely buried for centuries, with their stories only now being fully uncovered, emphasizes the ongoing struggle to acknowledge and address historical abuses. This historical reckoning has profound implications for contemporary discussions on child rights, forced labor, and systemic violence, urging us to remain vigilant against such abuses in any form. Finally, The Devshirme's legacy serves as a somber warning about the dangers of unchecked power and the dehumanization of vulnerable populations. It compels us to consider how societies remember or choose to erase traumatic histories and the moral imperative to give voice to the silenced victims of systemic violence. The resilience of these boys, who endured unimaginable horrors, and the enduring scars of their trauma, remind us that even in the darkest chapters of history, the human spirit, though bent, can never be entirely broken. Their stories, though painful, must be told and remembered, not just as a condemnation of the past, but as a perpetual lesson for the present and the future. This chilling exploration of the Devshirme system offers a comprehensive and deeply unsettling look into one of history's most egregious acts of state-sponsored child abuse. It is a story that reveals not only the physical brutality, but also the sophisticated psychological mechanisms designed to obliterate identities and enforce absolute obedience. Through the combined lens of survivor testimonies, historical records, and burgeoning archaeological findings, the narrative compels us to confront the unsettling truths of power, control, and the profound, lasting impact of systematic violence. This history challenges us, as a global society, to reflect on how readily power can corrupt and control vulnerable populations, and the enduring importance of uncovering and reckoning with hidden atrocities in the historical record, ensuring that such dark chapters are never forgotten and hopefully never repeated.